And to Newswatch, you know, we live in such a punitive time now. You can't just make a mistake and you're forgiven, or there's a moderation there. You know, that you did bad, but that's enough. You've now got to be destroyed. It's pitiless. There's no moderation. Now, I've said Scott Morrison did the wrong thing in getting the Governor-General to secretly making the Minister of 5 departments. And I've said the Governor-General, David Hurley, should have publicly announced those appointments, should have let people know what he was doing. But that does not excuse the left-wing Crikey for going after not the Governor-General even, but his wife, a woman who can't even speak out to defend herself. I mean, Crikey, its founder, Eric Beecher, I mean, he once hired me, you know. He claims to stand for quality journalism. Well, his publication actually mocked Linda Hurley for singing and for reading the Bible. As the headline of its article says, the greatest hits of Her Excellency Linda Hurley. Last week we found out the Governor-General's wife, Linda Hurley, likes hula hoops, for exercise it means, and the Bible. She also likes to sing like a lot. And Crikey posted a couple of her videos, including this, a song of hope that she wrote for the lockdowns.
We'll meet again when it's over. We'll hug and kiss, shake hands.
It mocked how she looked, it mocked how she sang it, it mocked the words. Mock, mock, mock. Joining me is Gerard Henderson, head of the Sydney Institute, columnist of the Australian newspaper and author of the Media Watchdog blog, out every Friday. Gerard Henderson, this mockery of Linda Hurley, your response?
Well, it's quite shameful. It's just sneering. I mean, Charlie Lewis wrote it, but Peter, you mentioned Eric Beecher. He's always lecturing people about journalistic standards. So is the editor-in-chief, Peter Fray. This should never have been published. And Mrs. Hurley can't defend herself, and she has no reason to. As I understand it, I don't know her personally. She does very good work for charity. She sings because a lot of people like singing, and Crikey decides to mock her, knowing she's defenceless, and for no reason at all. I mean, the report that's come down today by the Solicitor General has said that nothing in Vellet was done, but Crikey's out there mocking, not once, but twice, and of course laughing at the Bible. And as I understand it, it's probably the best-selling book of all time, the Bible. But if you read the Bible while you're doing exercise, Crikey thinks it's okay to mock you. I mean, it's just unprofessional comment. It's probably not worth considering, except there's just another example of the left sneering, because they've got nothing much else to say on these matters. Well,
if they read the Bible, they might learn a little bit about mercy for a start, and that he is without sin cast the first stone. I mean, the mockery, I'm not going to go through it all because I don't want to add to Linda Hurley's distress, but it was quite personal and quite rude and quite needless. And what I struggle to understand, Gerard, is how people of the left, who tend to pride themselves on being supposedly more moral and more tolerant, not like you and me, can actually be so cruel, so wantonly cruel. It's like Bertrand Russell once said, that much that passes as idealism is disguised hatred or disguised love of power. I'll give you another example from the ABC's Q&A last Thursday. Well, don't give you, you told me about this. From British left-wing writer Johann Hari, piling into Scott Morrison.
Well, Scott Morrison seems to me a bit like herpes. Just when you think it's gone away, it comes back worse than ever.
Did anyone on that very woke ABC show panel protest against such a foul and degrading, likening Scott Morrison to a venereal disease?
Well, Stan Grant was in the chair. I think he's one of the ABC's best presenters, and I think he's done a better job on Q&A than the others. But Stan said nothing. He joined in the laughter. The audience was full of mocking, sneering leftist. They all laughed. And later on, the laughter resumed towards the end of the program. So comparing Australia's former Prime Minister with herpes, you've just got off the plane from Britain, you don't know much about the country, and you're into that, and people think you're terribly funny. It was an unprofessional comment. It was the comment of an absolute lightweight. I mean, if you can't say something more critical of Scott Morrison, you've got nothing to say. Now, you can make criticism of Scott Morrison, you can defend Scott Morrison, but that kind of language is unprofessional. To start with, I don't think it should have been on the panel. It was one of those panels where there was probably one Conservative and everyone against him. But he was on the panel, and he then makes this comment, and no one actually says, well, that's unprofessional, we don't want to hear that. But I'd have to say, if you made that comment about Julia Gillard, I think the program would have stopped, and rightly so, but it doesn't, because you're mocking a Conservative Prime Minister, and that passes for sort of what goes normally on Q&A with its baying leftist mob.
Oh, can you imagine someone on a Q&A panel likening Julia Gillard to herpes? Not that I would endorse that at all, but I think the reaction would be so extremely different. Just want to pick you up on something you hinted at there. Johan Hari, who was on that panel, that Q&A panel, is he actually someone to pass moral judgments on anyone in the first place?
Well, if you look him up on the web, no, the answer is no. I mean, he's admitted to plagiarism, he's admitted to falsifying online sites. But I think there's a more important criticism than that. Look, he's written a few books. He's a controversial figure. I don't regard him as a deep thinker. But if someone of that kind had gone to Britain, he wouldn't have been asked on a major British program and asked to comment on the recent British Prime Minister, because it would be assumed that he didn't know much, or she didn't know much about Britain. So this guy comes out here. He's a raving lefty. He doesn't have a great background. So they bring him on Q&A and ask him what he thinks of Australian politics. I mean, this is the left is always banging on about the colonial cringe. That's the colonial cringe. A British lefty you listen to, a Conservative Australian or a left-wing Australian you don't, because you want to get a laugh out of the baying audience and you want someone who can mock Scott Morrison. He shouldn't have been on the program. He had no credentials to be on that program discussing Australian politics, of which he knows virtually nothing, as far as I can gather.
Last night, a fawning interview on the ABC by host Sarah Ferguson, interviewing Peter Garrett, the rock star and former Labor Environment Minister. Here's just the taste.
Now, your famous album, your most famous album, let's just call it 10987, just for brevity. Common narrative is that generation who rushed out and bought that album, they're the ones who failed the world on climate change, and I'm not including you and the band in that charge. But were you and your followers simply overwhelmed by the power of the fossil fuel lobby and the politicians aligned with it?
Well, I think the whole world has been overpowered, no question. Yeah, baby boomers have got something to answer for by experiencing pretty good standards of living in Western countries, I mean, and yet letting climate run unabated.
Note the closed shop, shared assumptions. The world's going to hell in a handbasket, global warming is terrible, terrible. Groan, moan, did our generation let them down? What did you make of it all?
Well, I'd like to be on the end of one of those interviews. It was just a suck-up interview saying how wonderful he is. But what I know of Peter Garrett I quite like. But we're talking here about Sarah Ferguson. If you're going to ask a tough question, who has been driving carbon emissions in this country? Peter Garrett and his band. I mean, he's for 45 years been flying around the world. He uses an electric guitar. He's been on microphones. He is one of the. If there is global warming, he's a cause of it. And Sarah Ferguson said, look, he's all okay. Look, if he wants to be fair dinkum, I could help out here. I've been a sackcloth and some old second-hand, third-hand sandals, and get rid of the electric guitar and don't travel and save the planet. Just sort of sing in alternate.
Honestly, you are so helpful. You're always willing to help people go that extra yard.
Well,
and certainly Garrett's own emissions, emissions, have added up to judge again by last night's interview. Just listen to this evidence.
You've been on an epic final tour around the world.
When we came back from the big tour that we did a couple of years ago, global tour, the Great Circle,
all that touring, all those contrails. Oh, my dear. Gerard Henderson, thank you so much indeed for your time. May you walk home, in sandals preferably.